Good evening. I'm Paul Brawley. I'm your county auditor. Let me first thank you all for participating in Richland 101. I think it's a very important portion of what we do here in the county in terms of informing our citizens, because you all can become ambassadors for all of the information that you will ultimately glean from the various sessions that you will go through here. I'm an elected official in Richland County. As you would see, my term of office started July the 1st, 2015, and it will run through June 30 for 2019. My office is located right here in this building, right straight down there. My office hours are from 8:30 to 5:30. We give you an additional 30 minutes so that you have an opportunity to come here if you need to. But what we have tried to do is put as many things online as we can for those of us that are technology savvy, so that you can go online and retrieve that information versus coming down here. But we are open until 5:30. It doesn't cost you anything else. It was just a matter of moving one employee from coming in at 8:30 to coming in at 9 o'clock, and that employee gets off at 5:30. So we didn't hire an additional employees as a result of doing that. Now, you have to always have a decent joke, right? So, Liz has been talking about me tonight. So it's my time to get back at Liz at the assessor. My slide here says this is how a buyer sees your home. Log cabin, right? Next slide, please. This is how you see your house. It's got the nice flowers around it, real cottagey, like real nice looking house, right? All right, this is how your lender sees your home, right? And then this is how your lender's appraiser sees your house whenever he tries to attach a value to it. But this is how the tax assessor sees it. No, but to give you a little background information on the auditor's office, and you all please ask questions as I go through my presentation. I don't mind you interrupting me. I'm old, but I'm not quite that old yet. But I am a little lightheaded this afternoon. I don't know if you all are bothered by the pollen or not, but this pollen is just, whew. But the auditor's office, we're responsible for handling the homestead exemption. I think the question was asked earlier, and disability applications on the exemptions on your primary residence. I think Liz talked about the homestead exemption, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. We handle all of the appeals on personal property. Anything dealing with real property goes to the assessor's office. Anything dealing with your cars, your business personal property, your boat, all of those things come to the auditor's office if you have an appeal on the value of it. We handle all of the refunds for real and personal property, as I just said, and we assess motor vehicles, watercraft, and business personal property. Now, when I tell you that we assess motor vehicles, we actually get a list from the Department of Revenue that's given to all of the auditors across the state that tells us what the value of your vehicles are. And that's what we use initially when we send your tax bills out. Now, if you have things like high mileage on your vehicle, that can change the value of your vehicle. And that's why you have to appeal the value of your vehicle before your tax bill is due. But again, for taxing uniformity in the state, a car in Georgetown County ought to be valued at the same thing as a car in Richland County, again, unless there's high mileage or other exceptions to that. We list all property for taxation. That includes real property, personal property, mobile homes. Our real property, real estate, land, buildings, mobile homes, as Liz talked about, but we also receive tax returns. And that's because all businesses in the county have to file a tax return with us for their personal property. We don't tax individuals for the furniture and fixtures that you have in your home, but you take that same couch, that same chair, that same computer, that same television. If it's in a business, that business has to pay property taxes on it. As long as you own something in South Carolina, you're going to pay taxes on it. Every year. Yeah. And there are very few exemptions, but and I'll go through those because I think it's important that everybody knows what the exemptions are, because that's important as you start dealing with your taxes or either your neighbor, because you're here because you want to share this information with other folks. My office also calculates the millage rate. I heard the question over here earlier. And the millage rate is basically the tax rate that we use to do your tax bills by. That millage rate, that tax rate is approved by county council. What we do is we take all of the calculations that we get and we turn in to council what we feel is what the millage rate should be. I'll tell you that Richland County has a fairly high tax millage rate. One of the reasons, and that's why I asked Liz the question earlier, is because we have so much exempt property taxes in this county, so much exempt real taxes. You go down to places like Horry, Georgetown, Charleston, some of those other counties where they don't have the center of government, where they don't have all of the government buildings. You think about it, as Liz was talking about, we got municipal government, all the city buildings that are here, all the state offices, all the county offices, all the federal offices, because we are the hub of government in South Carolina. And you look at Fort Jackson, which is, a very large parcel of land that's not taxed. So, and all of the universities that we have here, none of those folks are taxed, and none of the churches. So when you put all that into the mix, we end up having to have to tax those of us that stay here a little bit higher than you do in some of the other counties. The exemptions from your property taxes, homestead was talked about earlier. One of the questions I get quite often as I go out to communities and talk about what my office functions are is the same thing you ask. At what age will I not pay taxes? And a lot of folks have the impression that at some point in time you're not going to pay taxes. And in fact, if your house is valued at less than $50,000 and you're over 65 and you've applied for the homestead exemption, you will be tax exempt. You won't pay any taxes, but you're going to pay that $269 for that little green container that we have in, $249, not $269, I'm sorry. But everybody has to pay for the little green container that you get for your solid waste. But in terms of taxes, if your house is valued at less than $50,000, you won't pay taxes. But if your house is valued at more than $50,000, you will pay taxes on that portion that's more than 50. And in order to qualify for homestead, it's not only just for the age for 65, and I shouldn't say age because I'm getting closer all the time, I'd imagine, but for those of us that might be 65 or older, only one spouse has to be that age. So if you're like I am, if you married a young thing, stop. but if you have a younger spouse, then you still qualify and you get 100% of the homestead exemption. And if something happens to you, your spouse, if that spouse is younger than you are, will continue to be able to receive the homestead exemption. And if you're legally blind, you qualify, or if you're 100% disabled. And that really impacts us in South Carolina because of the health disparities that we have in this state. A lot of people are 100% disabled. And they could be in their 30s, 20s, 40s, and they qualify for the homestead exemption. If they own their home, they get the ability to have that first $50,000 value of their home deducted. Someone asked a question about military veterans that are 100% disabled because of military connection don't pay any taxes. So you can have a $400,000 home and you won't pay any taxes not just in Richland County, but in South Carolina. And you also get 2 of your cars tax exempt. But that disability has to be approved through the Veterans Administration, and again, it has to be service connected in order for us to do that. No, ma'am. No. Yeah. And the other folks that get property taxes exempt, paraplegics, hemiplegics, quadriplegics, and law enforcement officers that were injured in the line of duty that end up being 100% disabled, or firefighters. And they get 1 car exempt. And of course, if you're active duty, the Soldiers and Sailors Act says if South Carolina is not your legal residence, the Soldiers and Sailors Act says that your vehicles are not taxable in this state. So the only thing that you will end up getting from us, you may get a tax bill, but you have to prove to us every year by sending us your LES that you're still active in the military and that you're still assigned here to Fort Jackson or Shaw someplace and you're living here. Then the only thing that tax bill will have is a $20 road maintenance fee that we charge everyone. All right, to give you an idea of where we get all of our information from to kind of do your tax bills with, we have airplanes in South Carolina, those arrows pointing in. So my office receives information from the Federal Aviation Commission on all of the owners of airplanes. If it's a personal airplane, any personal property that you have is taxed at your situs, and that's just big words that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but your situs is actually where you live. So Richland County is your legal residence, you own an airplane, doesn't matter where you have it hangared at, it matters where you live at. So we're gonna tax you on that airplane, and we get that information from the Federal Aviation Commission. We get information from the Department of Revenue on manufacturers, our fee and lieu companies, and various information from them. Richland County Assessor's Office, all of our real property, mobile homes come from them in terms of how we do your tax bills. The Department of Motor Vehicles, we get a file from them every month so that we can send out the tax bills 45 days in advance of your taxes being due on your automobile. We get a file from the Department of Natural Resources for boats and motors. There are a few people in this county that have their vessels registered with the United States Coast Guard. So all of those folks that have their vessels registered with the Coast Guard, we get a file from them telling us that these are the people in your county that own this property, and we tax from those records. And of course, that arrow down there that goes in is very important to me, is that the other input is your input every 4 years in who holds this office. So this is an election, again, as I said earlier, an elected office, so every 4 years you all get an opportunity to either keep me or get someone new. To give you an idea of what the output of our offices are, we send out reports to the Richland County Administration. The Treasurer's Office get a file from us so that when you go to pay your taxes, you have the same records that we have sent you. And then, of course, each one of you all get these nice little notes from us either every month or at least in November on your home taxes. Yeah, that's my Christmas card that I send out every November so that you can get your tax bills. And the Department of Revenue, we also generate reports to them. I've got 21 folks that work in my office full-time. We have 3 part-time employees, and we generate, you can see over the years, but we generate 553,000 tax bills. We're very paper intensive, and I've done some things to try to make that less paper intensive in terms of how we do things internally, but in terms of generating the external bills, we generate over 553,000 bills a year. And we do that with a very small staff. So when you call my office and you don't get that quick response sometimes, that's potentially why. And just to give you an idea about type, I think Liz talked about 170,000 real estate bills. And you can see the larger bulk of that is vehicles. We have 339,000 vehicle bills that we generate in this county. Next slide, please, sir. The dollars that we have billed so that we can run the schools is, I think Donald talked about earlier, all the various agencies that we have. For last fiscal year, that total was $759.9 million to run Richland 1, 2, 5, county services, the library, the zoo, just the various agencies that you'll see in a few minutes. Give you an idea how that kind of breaks out in terms of where the real money comes from. The real money comes from, you can see that 73% is from real personal property. That 17% is from merchants and manufacturers. 9% is from vehicles, even though 339,000 of our bills are for vehicles. You can see it only generates about 9% of our revenue mix. Now, how do we calculate the millage rate? And it's not an extremely complicated process, but it's one that you have to have all of the things together to get it done. I think Liz talked about there's about $22 billion of real estate property in this county. You can see our total assessed value for last year was $28.4 billion. So there's probably about $6.4 billion of additional property like cars, business personal property taxes, manufacturers, utilities that we tax. What we do is take the entire appraised and assessed value. The appraised value is $28.4 billion. Our collection rate, we would like for it to be 100%, but it's not. For my calculation purposes, I normally use about 93.45% of that in terms of how we calculate the collection percentage. And that's not really the collection percentage, because as people get their tax bills, like when my niece got her tax bill, and she immediately went down and applied for the 4% legal resident, her tax bill went from $6,000 down to about $1,500. You know, so I have to account for those kind of circumstances that happen as well. But if you use that 93.45% collection rate, you see we go down to $26.5 billion. And what we tax on is based on assessment. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But you take the assessed value at 100% of that $28.4 billion, comes out to be $1.5 billion for assessed property values. And we take 93% of that, 93.45%, and you get a collection rate of $1.4 billion. Now, how do we get to the millage rate? So county council sets the budgets, okay? I think Donna probably talked about that a little bit. So they set the budget for the general fund, for my office, the sheriff's department, and everybody else. And that current budget based on taxes, now not based on fees and all of the other mixes that he had in there, but this is just strictly on taxes, is $83,839,200. We take that $83,839,200 and divide it by what is called our collection assessment, which is that $1.4 billion, and you come up with 57.9 mils, or the tax rate to operate Richland County government here. And so that's how we do the millage rate. That's how we do it for the school districts. That's how we do it for the library. We take that same number, except for when you're doing it in the school districts, you're doing it with only the property that's in that school district. And that's why we have these different tax districts. So that's a kind of short and dirty way of how we get to the millage rate. There's a little more things involved, but in terms of a very high level, that's how we get to your millage rate. All right, important part about governing any place is you're going to advocate for one agency versus another agency. Somebody may like the school districts more than they may like the zoo. This gives you an idea of what all of the budgets are for all of the millage agencies that we raise taxes for. You see School District 1, and again, this is just for taxes, $199.4 million. School District 2, $137.2 million. They have bonds. I think you were talking about the buildings and different things before. They have bonds that they have to pay because they're constructing different things in the school district. And that's the money that you see, 64 million for District 1, 69.2 for District 2. The Recreation Commission has a budget of $13.3 million. Again, this is strictly on taxes. So you can go down and look, and I had someone ask me in one of the previous one-on-one classes, well, what if I think the library ought to get more money than the zoo? Well, that's an excellent opportunity for you to come to the budget sessions when county council are doing the budget sessions and come in and advocate for the library, for example. You know, so that you let them know that your priority for them to set would be for the library. Somebody else may come in and say it's for the school districts. But this gives you an opportunity, and I know it's kind of small on your handouts, but this gives you an opportunity to kind of see where the money is going as a result of the taxes that we generate for you. All right, how's my tax notice calculated? Now I'm gonna wrap up in just a minute. Am I getting close, Bill? All right. We talked about an assessment ratio. I think Liz talked about 4%, 6%. That's on real estate. So your assessment, you take the fair market value, or either the appraised value of whatever we're talking about, and it's multiplied times an assessment ratio that's given to us by statute, by law in South Carolina. And then we take that, and then we multiply that times your millage rate to get your tax bill done, which I'll show you in a minute. We've got a couple of assessment ratios. Next slide, I'll just kind of show you. Next one, please. All right. Primary residence, as we talked about, is 4%. You just have to apply for it. And you only apply for that one time, unless you move, unless there's a change to your deed. You know, so if you got married and you added your husband or your wife to your deed, that will be a deed change. The assessor's office will send you a notice telling you that there's been a deed change. And if you don't fill out that legal residence again, you're going to lose it. But if you don't change anything on your deed, then you apply for legal residence one time and you continue to get it unless you move or something happens. The other real personal property is 6%, and that's by law, by statute. We can't change that. Personal property, that's boats, motors, airplanes, business personal property, manufacturing property, 10.5%. Agriculture property, 6% for corporate farms, 4% for the guys like I am. Manufacturing and utility property is at 10.5% of the fair market value, as I talked about. Railroad and pipeline is 9.5% of the fair market value. You don't think about things like that being taxed, but railroads, all these tracks that run through Richland County, the railroad companies have to pay us taxes for that. And then vehicles are 10.5% for business vehicles, or either certain class vehicles that have a certain weight are at 10.5%. Other vehicles at 6%. All right, let's look at how you calculate your tax bill. So you all can go back and check me every time I send you those special notices, right? The example that I'm going to use is a house that's located in 1 UR, which is Upper Richland, in School District 1. It's a $100,000 valued home, makes it easy for the calculation. So if it's your primary residence, you got the 4% assessment ratio, right? So you multiply that 4% times that $100,000, and your assessed value for that home is $4,000. And the millage rate for 1 UR is 453.1. A millage is actually 1/1000th of 1%. But when we actually put it out, we put it out as 453.1 mils. But when we get ready to calculate it for your tax bill, we then move your decimal point over 3 places, okay? So that's why you see that 0.4531. You multiply that times the assessed value, and you come up with $1,812.40. Now, Act 388 that Liz talked about earlier that gives primary owners a tax exempt for school operating costs. So out of that 453.1 mills in that tax district, 250 of those mills are for School District 1's operations. So we are going to now give you a credit for that. You paid an additional penny in sales tax, but now we're going to give you a credit for that particular portion on your tax bill. So we take the $4,000, which is the assessed value, multiplied times 0.250, which is the operating millage for School District 1, and you get a $1,000 credit on your tax bill. And the other portion is your local option sales tax. We pay an additional penny in Richland County on our sales tax, and all of that money is used to offset our taxes, our real personal property taxes. And the calculator for local option sales tax is 0.001411. We collect probably about close to $35 million comes to the county for our that local option that 1% tax that we pay here. So we take that $35 million and we divide it by all of the property values in the county, and that's how we come up with that multiplying factor, which is 0.01411. And so you get $141.10 credit on your tax bill. And as I talked about earlier, you get that wonderful $249 fee on there for your solid waste container. When you add all that up, this tax bill comes out to be $920.30. To give you an idea, you do the same calculation for homestead. For the exception, when you go back to actually do the homestead credit, you can see that we're taking $50,000, multiplying it times 0.04, because that's the assessment ratio, and we come up with $2,000. Now, we've already given you a credit for school operating costs, which was the 250 mills. So we have to back that out, and that's why we come up with the 0.2031, because we can't give you credits twice. So when you multiply that out, you'll see you get a $406.20 credit, and then for your local option sales tax, it's cut in half. And some folks say, well, it's still a $100,000 house. Yes, it is, but you're only paying taxes on $50,000 now, right? So that's why your local option sales tax credit gets cut in half. And you can see in this case, this person's bill would go from $920.30 to $584.65. That's a nice deduction. That's why that homestead exemption is an important credit. You do the same thing with your cars. You know, you take the value of a car we send you, multiply it times 6% if it's a private vehicle. You get your assessed value, multiply it times the millage rate in your tax district, and you get your gross amount of taxes, and the only deduction that you get for cars is your local option sales tax. And we also add $20 in for your road maintenance fee. It's important as citizens that we involve ourselves in government. You know, I know we're all busy and, you know, we have to get home and do this or do that, but when government is not checked, that's my office, anybody's office that's elected or either appointed. When citizens allow us to go unchecked is when things happen that shouldn't happen. So that's why I always encourage folks, come to these county council meetings, go to your city council meetings. Because those things that happen in those meetings, and I know they have a lot of executive sessions sometimes where they have to go back and talk about contracts. But anything other than contracts should be talked openly in the public. So as citizens, you have the right to come to any county council meeting, any city council meeting, and they have input items on each of the agendas. So I would encourage each of you to come out for those meetings, listen to what your county council person or your city council person is doing, because they may be telling you one thing and doing something different. You know, and if you're not there, or if you're not watching it on television because they're televised now, then you're not informed. But it makes us all better public servants. When we have an engaged citizenry, it makes everybody a better public servant. And that's what we have to have as a community, because we all function better when everybody is comfortable with their governing structure. And again, I encourage you, the budgets are going on. It's one of the most important parts. I mean, you look at $770-something million between the school districts and everybody. So if you don't like the fact that the school district budget might be X number of dollars, the school districts are putting their budgets together now in preparation of bringing them before county council. So now would be a good time for you to go to your school board meetings. Now would also be a good time for you to start looking as county council begins to engage itself in the general fund, to come to these meetings so you can have some input. I mean, if you don't want to have any direct input, you can come and be informed. But all of our meetings are open to the public. You know, again, the only time that they're not is when they go into executive session, so they go back, county council goes back in this room and meets in the executive session. But other than that, everything else should be done in the public's purview. The pins that I handed out, as well as the handout, have my number on it in my office. If you need me, don't hesitate to call me. Thank you all for your attention.